Welcome to the 1% Doctor Podcast. What separates the good from the great, the standard from the extraordinary? It's mindset, it's execution, and it's the relentless pursuit of growth. I'm Adam Lamb. I'm your host. Welcome to the show. Welcome back to the 1% Doctor Podcast. I'm your host, Adam Lamb. Today, we have a very special guest. It's super interesting, awesome story, and a total powerhouse, Dr. Kat Divingian. And she has built an amazing business, helping tons of underserved people in the community as it pertains to healthcare. She just has a heart for God. She has a heart for people. She has a heart for health and wellness and just leadership. So we're super blessed to have her on the show today. First, I want to dive into where she got started. We're going to talk a little bit about what, I think it's so interesting to hear from different physicians. What was that moment that they decided they want to go down the path of medicine? And then what I've noticed is sure that there's a process that all physicians go into as far as like medical school and residency and all these kind of things, but they all have a unique story. And that story really impacts where they're at today and how they look at things. And I think we can learn a lot from that. Dr. Kat, Dr. D, we're good friends. And so we have different nicknames for Dr. Kat. So glad to have you here. Honored to have you here. Love you like a sister. Glad you're, getting to just having you finally on the show, which is exciting. Tell us a little bit about, why you got into medicine. Give us a little background of the younger years.
Thanks so much, Adam. When I was 5, we had those typical exercises that kiddos get where you are asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I knew that I wanted to be a physician. I mean, there was no doubt in my mind. But for some weird reason, I just never really went for it. I went ahead and I became a scientist, a research scientist, went into the Navy, did many different activities. And it wasn't until Christmas Eve, a number of years later, when my mother had a come to Jesus meeting with me. And she said, stop dancing around this whole medicine thing. And why don't you just go ahead and do this finally? So I applied. And the first year I put out 20 applications and got 0. So it's not easy being super old and being non-traditional. The following year,
I had a buddy of mine's wife who wanted to go into medicine. And it was this sounds silly, but she was even like, I'm going to have to pretend I'm like a lesbian or like something different to like meet a DEI score to try to get in, because she was like 38 years old to get into medical school. So I can relate. And there's my funny story that goes along with it. So a year later, everybody says no. You're trying to apply.
right.
Then what?
And it's weird. I stepped out in faith the next year. I only put out 7 applications, and I ended up getting a couple of interviews. One of them was at UCF in Orlando, and the ageism was so prevalent that I had to ask for new interviews because they were telling me I would die if I go into emergency medicine at my age. I was in my late 40s then.
Meanwhile, you can like probably kick all their butts because you're like super fit athlete.
And then at USF in Tampa, I got admitted. So I went through med school, at least twice as old as everybody. My last biochemistry was 25 years ago. And I was trying to figure out, I didn't even know that there were so many different parts of RNA by then. So things had changed. Yeah.
I think though that bringing a lot of that wisdom that you had just by being older with more experience, and learning something, learning something twice. There's a lot to be said about that, of like learning something with the information that was had 20 years ago and then learning something later when there's more information. And you be seeing the evolution of science and evolution of discovery and the evolution of medicine, I think can also keep your perspective open to what's possible for the future. Because a lot of times, the amount of docs, not that I really roll with, but that exist, that are like, no, this is what I was trained. I'm like, bro, you're 60. That was 40 years ago or 35 years ago, like whatever. When you learn that, it's changed. Stuff's changed. There's research, there's new things, and they can get stuck in the same framework of what was versus what's possible. And I think it's probably a gift, to learn that stuff a little bit later and have the perspective of like, man, this is what I was taught back then. And now it's a little bit different, or it's expanded, or whatever tools we have now to process things, AI or different medical devices and medical treatments, right? We'll talk about that today. how there's new age medical treatments that have been crazy beneficial for certain people groups that you've been able to really do a great job at. Talk a little bit about the scientist side. Like what was the stuff you were doing? What was the stuff you kind of nerded out on in that part of your life?
Yeah, so I went into analytical chemistry and medical physics. I was very keenly interested in medical devices, especially sensors. So I was developing a lot of different devices, learning the engineering, kind of building these sensors, and just really looking from the subcellular level to being able to analyze what was going on at more of a holistic level. And I just thought that being able to peer inside the human body and to be able to measure it was the most phenomenal thing I'd ever experienced.
Cool. It'll get you to believe in God. I believe that. When you start seeing
I
that stuff and you're like, whoever created this.
Exactly. I mean, it was yeah, absolutely. I started off as a complete atheist, and it wasn't until I was sitting in a lecture in pulmonology and listening to how complex the lungs were that I realized at that very moment that there was a creator and that he created us.
Yes. Yeah. And that's, I hear that so often. I create a safe space for physicians to talk about their faith more than the world does. And so I hear that time and time again, which is refreshing and it's great because it's, I always subscribe when it comes to the faith side of things of like, you just don't have enough information, right? I denied faith most of my life. And then at 38, I got to a point where it's like the edge of your understanding is like a table, right? There's an edge. Picture a table in like a 10,000 square foot room. That's what's possible. And that table is what we know, right? And so there's an edge of that table. And beyond that, I'm like, well, how do you explain the rest of this? I don't know. Well, and there's probably a creator beyond that we understand. And it's humbling. And I think when it humbles you, you become a better servant, right? And you are a servant, right? You're a servant. You help people, you love people, you lead people, you solve problems for them as a physician. And that when that's your true heart, which unfortunately not all physicians have that same heart, but when that's your heart, you are a better leader. You're a better servant. We're here to serve. And I always use that example, especially with frustrating people. I'm like, what would Jesus do? I'm like, oh yeah, he washed their feet. And when I know that, hey, I'm just here to wash some feet, love on some people, my ability to impact and transform the lives of people is way greater than me thinking I'm some sort of superior person or operator or mind or anything like that. And I know you well, and I know that's how you operate as well, which is why I think you've had a tremendous amount of success. So, and then talk about the Navy. So, well, you did this in the Navy? Is like how did that all?
So I was a medical physicist. I was responsible for measuring all the different devices, everything from general dentistry, x-rays, all the way up to CAT scans, and even working on some radiation oncology. So I was helping to treat brain tumors with some of the radiation oncology equipment. And it was just such a phenomenal experience because I got to see another side of medicine that I wouldn't have seen since I never really became a radiologist. That wasn't my specialty or my calling. It still was phenomenal to be able to be on that imaging side and to see how we interact with the patients and how that really serves the patients to be able to understand what's going on inside.
Hmm. And so, was that in the Navy, or then did the Navy come after, or that was just part of like your role in the Navy?
Yes, that's what I did in the Navy. That was my role, and I was also responsible for running radiological disaster drills on the USNS Mercy, which was a hospital ship that was converted from an oil tanker, and it was just this old-fashioned hospital ship that would float around the Pacific because I was at Naval Medical Center San Diego was where it was docked, and it was really phenomenal to be able to be involved in disaster medicine too, because that's where you start to learn to serve the community and you learn where the emergency exceeds the resources to where it becomes a disaster and people need massive amounts of help.
So did you that's interesting. I had someone on the who was more of like somewhat emergent. I guess she's a wilderness medicine expert, younger, and she's like, how can I practice medicine and travel the world? So like I think in April, like she'll go hike Mount Everest and she's like the doctor on staff. And like, so she goes and does all these cool, I can't think of her name right now, but she's awesome and does some cool stuff. And I think the reality of these things is like, there's so many different ways you can go practice medicine, have an impact, and do cool stuff. Did you do much like traveling? Were you like traveling on ships at all? Were you ever overseas stationed or anything like that? Or did you stay pretty much San Diego?
The joke is that I'm so salty. I had 2 days of sea service as we cruised around San Diego Bay. I never did. I was gonna go on what's known as a Unitas, which means go around the world on the Carl S. Vinson platform, but, I got out of the Navy before then, so I'm not truly salty like some of those sailors out there.
So then you got left the Navy, and what'd you do after that?
After that, I went back into academia, did more research in physics and chemistry, became a professor, and I also, for a little while, had a small tutoring company where I'd help people get into medical school by teaching them the NCAT. Yeah, and I was watching all my students go into medical school. I'm thinking, what's wrong with me? How come I'm not doing this?
Do you think it was a belief system in yourself? Like you just didn't believe you were qualified, didn't believe you were good enough, didn't believe you could do it? Was that a I mean, do you think that was a
Yeah,
lot of
that
correct?
Yeah, it's really strange because, I could operate in physics and chemistry at the highest level and even in the military serving that capacity. And I still think that I couldn't do it. So you're right. I had this mental block that somehow doctors were different critters and that it requires something else that I thought I didn't have inside.
And then it's funny to fast forward and look at where you're at today when like you're clearly in like the top 1%, maybe top 0.1% of physicians when it comes to like earners and impact and like we don't have to jump into the money and revenue, but that you're successful. You're super successful. Uh and I look back, listening to the story and I'm trying to think of and that's why we talked about earlier of like getting into medicine maybe later, right? Where someone will be like, oh, you'll never make it. Well, you might not make it in the mainstream model where you might go make a few hundred grand, three, four, 500 grand a year, but you might have a perspective that gets you to 5 million, 10 million. Like who knows? Because you could see it through a different lens than you're kind of called brainwashed, for lack of a better term, to believe through the traditional side when you have this other experience prior to that. And actually, a lot of the docs I work with have a story of stuff they've done and built or pursued or had experience outside of just going, direct into medical school young. And I think that perspective helps them see the other opportunity in medicine, how they can serve and build a really lucrative business in that space. And so
Absolutely.
how long after being in academia did you choose to when you finally took the leap to go into medical school?
Yeah, so I really didn't go into medical school until many, many years later. I was in my late 40s, graduated at 50, and then soon after that, I was able to join the army because they gave me an age waiver. I actually one of the reasons why I went to medical school was not only to serve people as a civilian, but to serve people as a soldier. They really have a lot of latitude in the army to be able to get people in who are much older, much more seasoned, and they're willing to see us through to be able to help other soldiers.
I mean, it's just crazy to go to medical school in your late 40s and then to graduate at 50, right? And if people see you, like you look better than most, 30-year-olds. And
Thank you.
like but you're fit and you care about health in your life and all those kind of things, like I won't ask your age, but I mean like you're I think most women your age would be like, dude, give me whatever she's got. Right. And so you've lived that life well, which is awesome, is leading by example. Who like if I'm gonna pick the 35-year-old overweight physician, or do I want, the 50 plus who's, you know, it's a lot harder. Like, I'll be 46 this month. And I think when these, younger people see me and being fit and they're like, oh man, how often do you work out? What's the secret? I'm like, the secret's 30 years, bro. It's consistency, living this as a lifestyle, not as a flash in the pan thing to get some muscles.
Absolutely. Even when I was in med school, if I had a surgical rotation, I had to get up at 3 a.m. Even if I had 5 minutes on the treadmill or 5 minutes of a Tabata workout, I would sneak that in. And on the days when I could just be in the gym for 2 hours because I would have a more cush type of rotation, I'd take advantage of that too. So I actually learned periodization in medical school and residency because there are ebbs and flows to the amount of time you can actually use in your performance. And when you have more of an academic or more of the you're doing the doctoring type of stuff, sometimes you have to scale back that physical performance and just to be able to make sure that you have all those energy systems meted out properly.
Yeah, I had to do the same thing when I ran for office just the last few months where I just didn't have the time to do the regular gym routine that I did. And it suffered. I could notice I was a little weaker, but like on the surface level, I still look good and I still was in shape, but I wasn't to my standard. But there's some times in life you have to kind of put a little heavier emphasis on the opportunity that's at hand, knowing, and that's where I think building, in any area of life, but in this situation, we're talking about physical, your body, of like that consistency. It makes it a lot easier. Like if you work out most of your life, you can slack for a season and pop right back pretty quick. But if you never do, it's a constant decline in your health and your ability to consistency creates, it's a lot easier to stay in shape when you get older if you've always stayed in shape. And obviously that's a big part of your life. So so you're in the Army after the Navy at 50 years old. I had never even heard of that, which is so cool. And how long were you in the Army? You're not still, are you?
No, I just got out in May. Unfortunately, I got banged up pretty bad because I was competing with all the youngins, but I was out there competing in the Army Combat Fitness Test while they still had it. And, we'd run real hard. I was with the 345th Field Hospital, which is like a MASH unit. So when I was 13, I always wanted to be Hawkeye Pierce and to be in MASH. I didn't want to be a surgeon. So, it's pretty cool being able to serve in that capacity. And we literally put up the tents, we put up the water systems, we'd put in all the environmental systems. So we not only were docs, but we knew how to put up everything that you would see in a MASH unit.
That's so cool. I didn't even know that about you. That's super cool. And for the young people, you're gonna have to Google what's MASH, the TV show. I remember it. I love that. I can still think of the theme song to it, like when MASH came out. MASH was great. That's awesome. And I was very little but I still remember MASH. That's super cool. So, in part of, like you said, banged up a little bit from, the body doing the Army thing, but also I think you agree or disagree, the opportunity too for what you had in building the business that you're currently operating on with Regenex and this kind of mobile wound care business that is rolled out over the last 12 plus months is also maybe a factor of why it was good timing also to leave.
Absolutely. So yeah, I've only been in this space for about 10 months. We've been going gangbusters in it. It's been just such an absolute blessing. I feel like this was something that God has really had his hand in, and I can tell you it's not me. I just stay in close prayer and in close walk with him because none of this was me. This was him.
Yeah, amen. And I think when we're willing to open up our mind and our perspective to where God's calling us, and it could be a new place, a place we're unfamiliar with. And again, it goes back to when we look at like your history, right? We look backwards and say, you've done a lot of really cool things that you probably didn't plan to do in the time, right? You might be able to, like, I like to be in a position where it's like, if I look back 5 years, I had no clue I'd be here. But if I look back 5 years from that, I had no clue I'd be there. And then I can trust that as I look forward, I'll look back 5 years from now and be like, dude, who would have thought? Right. And so where a lot of times I struggle where people are like, what's your 5 year plan? I'm like, "Dude, whatever God has, like, and so when you can surrender that, but still it requires you to be obedient, right? You still have to do the work. You still have to show up. You still have to be committed, be consistent, but it can be super fruitful. And so today you have like a large mobile wound care company where with lots of providers that work for you, and you're able to coordinate helping people that have wounds that they've maybe had for years that don't heal, through better medicine, I believe, and I think you believe, opportunities for them. And I saw this in the space a couple of years ago, which all kind of led into our alignment and our path of the opportunity to just help an underserved community, right? Typically, these are people that may not have money. Usually they may not have resources like a vehicle or someone to care for them. And so when there's an opportunity to reach those people that have maybe thrown in the towel on their healing and then get somebody to them and then help them recover or heal a wound that could likely lead to like amputation or something terrible, infection, I mean, that's amazing what you've been able to do. And it's fruitful for you, right? Like that you're building a team, you're employing people, like holy cow. So, what talk about some of the challenges that you had, maybe even just mentally of like, when we look back at what you've built over the last 12 months, again, you could probably look back 15 months ago and be like, no clue that this would be the blessing, right? And what challenges do you think you had to deal with, like almost like mentally, I think more than just the business stuff to expand and grow and build and accept and challenge yourself to do this?
Yeah. So, to your point too, Adam, just a few, for the past few years, when I was in the ER and I was rounding in hospitals, these little rural where you admit to yourself type of situations, and I would see the wounds in the patients, and it was really breaking my heart because the morbidity and the mortality these patients were going through was horrible. And as soon as I found out about this technology, I was saying to my hospitals, man, I've got to do this because this technology is something that's changing the game, finally moving the needle. What we're doing is just the same old, same old. So the technology is amazing. One of the challenges is with this biotechnology, explain it to people who otherwise might not have a very strong educational background and being able to break down because they face kind of this suspicion about, okay, what is this? Comes from placenta, or what do you mean? And explaining that what is going on with that, with all the growth factors, the collagen and so on, and break it down in a way that they can understand and accept the treatment, being able to make sure that we're coordinating with them because people are messy. And so people have all sorts of different schedules, making sure that we're all coordinated as a team, being sure that the providers who are out in the field are doing the right thing because we are standing out as a beacon for being ethical as a company. And I'm attracting people into this company who are tired of doing the wrong thing. They're tired of losing sleep because they're asked to do unethical things by other wound care companies. We will never, ever ask our practitioners to do that. I would rather pass on a lot of money coming in than to do the wrong thing. We are always number one I'd say number one premise is honor God, and if we could do
Yes.
that, then everything else falls into place. So, it's a matter of doing the right thing and then just coordinating to make sure that it gets done in the right way and providing that white glove service. So those 3 components are always a challenge to make sure that we are leveling up all the time.
Yeah, and that's why I live my life Matthew 6:33. Seek first the kingdom of God, right? So putting him first, submitting to what in surrendering and being obedient, also in his righteousness, which is the second part, doing the right thing, doing what's ethical, like never cutting corners or taking shortcuts. And all of these things will be added to you, right? And so we can look at your business and where you're at and what you built and say, yeah, that works. That's a Matthew 6:33 example, right? And I think too often people don't believe that's possible. And that's why they don't pursue that particular path. They think, and again, mainstream medicine and the world and the system does not embrace that mentality. Right. It's like do the right thing so you don't get in trouble. It's like, well, why don't you just do the right thing to do the right thing? You know what I mean?
Right.
And that's where I joke with people. I'm like, I don't have any rules in my life. I don't have laws. I just follow the Bible, and that just usually aligns with doing the right what's right and what I'm supposed to do. Obviously, you have compliance and stuff like that around medicine and HIPAA and all these kind of things, but that's easy because it's the rules I'm following. That's the righteous way of doing things. And you're able to help a lot of people doing stuff non-traditionally. I think a lot of docs that I would talk to, hey, we're going to spend 20 grand a month on Facebook ads. What? Well, it's like, well, hey, if that helps me make 300 grand a month, would you do it? Yeah. And it's like, they don't even believe, the amount of doctors, I'm like 5 grand a month. And I'm like, dude, that's a tip of the spear. And so like going to a different level. So you also have to have some, this risk tolerance has to exist. And so talk about that a little bit. Like, what do you think your appetite for risk is? And has that played a part in your ability to grow so big and so fast?
Absolutely. I have a big appetite for risk, which is very fortunate and a lot of energy to put into this business to just to make sure this practice just to make sure that everything runs right. So it's kind of the combination of both and the wherewithal to be able to manage all the little details. So everything has to be in line, but you really need to step out because if you see the return on investment, if you can foresee that if you take a chance and if you fail, at least you know that's not what you want to do anymore. And we have failed so many times. We've had where the systems were not right in many ways and things would fall through the cracks and we had to learn to develop SOPs, standard operating procedures, so that we are more consistent and then we could take the next leap forward so that we could take even more risk as we go along.
Yeah, and that's part of maturing a business, and a lot of people don't wanna continue to mature, they don't wanna let go, right? I've worked tons of physicians where it's like I'm like, "Hey, listen, you should be the least knowledgeable," like, I've even look, we could talk about the wound care space. I'm like, "Your team should be better at putting wounds on than you. Your team should be able to follow because you're great, you build SOPs, but you can't touch every patient if you wanna scale. Like, you just can't do it. There's only so much time in the day, there's so much effort, energy, and that if you're seeing one or two patients a week, but you got a team of five that are seeing another three each, you're winning, right? Versus you trying to see 30 in that situation and you're burned out, you're not doing as good of a job. Maybe, your energy is not there. And so learning how to scale, trusting yourself to scale, there can be a lot of risk involved in that. But you've obviously done a great job at walking that process and pursuing that because of your ability. And I think that a lot of it's just that past that you have a grit to you, like who does the Navy and the Army? And there's a bit of an anomaly piece to you, but also, another doc that might be listening or somebody who's thinking of going into medical school, but they're 35 or they're 40. And it's like, dude, do what look at her. She's crushing it. Right? Before we kind of hop off on this, I think you've just been a wealth of knowledge in this information. Do you have any advice that you would share with our listeners that you think are just that's profound and maybe that's helped you in your personal growth, your business growth to share before we hop off?
Yes, I would say that the biggest factor is faith because I would say that when I was much younger, I completely lacked faith. I didn't trust the Lord for anything. I tried to be master of the universe, and my mother would always say, "You need to resign as master of the universe." I'm such a control freak, and I know other docs are total control freaks like me. And being able to surrender that control and to know that the Lord will pick up those pieces if you're faithful and willing to walk in the next step. Sometimes that next step is so freaking scary and it feels like there's a cliff there without any sort of a safeguard there. But if the Lord tells you and he puts in your heart that this is the next step, whether you like it or not, if you're told to go to Nineveh, you freaking go to Nineveh. Otherwise, God's going to find a way to get you there and you're going to be preaching the word one way or another. So one way or
Or he's going to
another,
pick somebody else, right? Or
or
he's going
he's
to
going
pick
to pick
somebody else,
somebody else. Exactly.
right? If you
So
look back
one way or another.
You could look back 12 months ago and say, man, if I wouldn't have said, here I am, Lord, send me, where would you be today? Right.
That's
Compared to
right.
where you are. And it's like, so yes, faith, you're right. I agree 100%. Faith is it. Knowing that, man, you get one shot at this life and that if you trust God, he's got you. Like his word, there's the books right here. It's the word of God and the promises of God are true and they're forever. And should you just submit yourself to it, you will win, right? He's going to add all those things to you. So that, man, that was powerful. This has been a great podcast and a great episode. And I think so many people are going to walk away inspired, encouraged from what you've shared today. So, and I'm grateful for our friendship. I love you. Like I said, your family in my heart. And I think you and your husband, Creed, he's awesome as well. You got an awesome person in your corner, which can be helpful too, which I'd say the other part of, faith is the one, and you find a good partner to support you and run alongside you too in life. That also is very helpful. And so I
That's
want to
right.
thank you for being here today, Dr. Kat. Love you. We'll put some information in the show notes too. If people want to follow you and check out your stuff and the business, we'll put all that stuff in there. Thank you all for joining the 1% Doctor podcast. My name's Adam Lamb. I'm your host with Dr. Kat today. Please like and subscribe to the channel and share this episode with somebody who you think might get some value. Thank you for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode of The 1% Doctor. Please be sure to subscribe to the show where you're able to consume more podcasts, get more value, and learn more about doctors potentially just like you. Please tell a friend, review the show, and we'll see you in the next episode.